Welcome to Hope City Church.
This is a place where you don't have to have it all together. Where it's okay to not be okay. We're all in the same boat.
That's why we gather every Sunday, because we believe Jesus gives us a better way to do life.
This is a place where we can connect and grow in our faith, where we are challenged to not settle for complacency.
Where we pursue grace and truth with a desire to become more like Jesus.
Our ultimate hope is to be a place where we bump into Jesus and experience his life-changing hope.
This hope changes our families.
This hope changes our workplaces and cities.
This hope changes you, and this hope changes me.
This hope is for everyone.
Yeah, let's go. You guys ready? So excited. I find myself randomly getting attracted to things on TV that really no other time in life would I really care about. Just random uses of information. There's places like, Destination Discovery. I love weird, nerdy things. I love Homestead, what's the name? Homestead Recovery? Is that what it's called? I would never live on a homestead, but I love that show because it's just interesting to watch. And there are times when you learn information, you just store it away. And that was the case a few Saturdays back this summer when I learned about a place on planet Earth that I'd never heard of before. It's a place that is one of the most remote, isolated places on Earth. I'm all in. Useless, nerdy facts right there. I'm never going to go there. I'm not the expedition guy. I'm not a backpacker. I'm not going to Antarctica on a mission. But I just love to consume these weird, interesting things. And so I learned about one of the most remote places on planet Earth. Now I want to show you a map of where this is located. It's in the Pacific Ocean. And you can see this point right here. This is actually named, Point Nemo. Point Nemo, so it's named after Captain Nemo in the novel. That actually means no man's, like no man's land. How many of you guys have ever heard of no man's land? You've ever heard that phrase before? It's a place where no one is gonna go. Like as a parent, we have places where we just want to be adults. There's no man's land. When our door shuts in our bedroom, please don't disturb. My wife and I want to have a grown-up conversation just for 5 minutes, right? Like no man's land is a place where no one can go, no one should go, no one wants to be. And there's this place that scientists have found on Earth that's one of the most remote places in all of the ocean. Now I want to show you the second map to show you just how remote it actually is. Point Nemo is more than 1,000 miles away from any landmass and even further away from actual humans. In fact, they determined it's the most remote place on Earth that there is no human contact. It's not in the normal lanes of shipping channels. You wouldn't just bump into Point Nemo. It's a place so remote that actually they have been storing junk at the bottom of the sea that when satellites time is up, that they crash them there, and it's a space junkyard at Point Nemo because no one would go there. It's lonely and it's isolated. And today, I want to talk about those two words because I believe everybody in this room, everybody in Springdale and Northwest Arkansas, and really planet Earth have experienced being at a Point Nemo in their life. And it's not a place that is evident to scientists or on a map. It's only a place that you know. You see, it's possible to exist on this earth and to experience loneliness and isolation and have no one know that. You can be in this room right now and walk in and walk out of the door and actually be experiencing that, and we would have no idea. Sometimes it's really obvious when you disappear from connections and relationships, but Point Nemo is a place that we have to address because it's a place of loneliness and isolation, and it's the very reason why this church is here. Churches all over right now are meeting on Sundays, not just so that we can have a gathering, but so that we can address the real issue of loneliness and isolation. And Jesus was a master at this. Jesus was incredible at this. Jesus knew that at the core of humanity, we need to address the issue of loneliness and isolation. No one knows more than Jesus just how big of an issue Point Nemo is in our lives. He had some friends with him, the disciples, and they had a rhythm. They had a rhythm that on the map was really on the left side of the Sea of Galilee. If you were to look at Israel, there's a body of water called the Sea of Galilee. And on the left side is where they spent most of their time. The rhythm of their days was walking and teaching and watching Jesus do the things that he does. And there was a moment in time when he decided to disrupt their rhythm. And my prayer for you today is that whatever rhythm you have, if loneliness and isolation, if there's a Point Nemo, if that's the rhythm of your life, that Jesus would disrupt your rhythm so that it's not your rhythm that you follow any longer, that you would join his rhythm. That's what it means to follow Jesus. And the disciples were learning that when they were walking with him. And so there's a story in the Bible. If you have your phones, you can Google it. If you have a paper Bible, it's in one of the 4 Gospels. If you're new today and you've never opened a Bible, don't be like intimidated. It can be intimidating because there's like all these words in here and it's just big and there's just all these things. There are 4 books in the Bible that talk about Jesus the most. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's in the New Testament. The Bible's divided up those 2 parts, right? And if you've never read it before, it can be kind of confusing. There's 4 accounts, eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus and the rhythm that he had with people. And so we're going to be in the book of Luke today, in Luke chapter 8, at one of the moments when he disrupted the rhythm of his disciples to do something to address loneliness and isolation. So Luke chapter 8, we're going to start in verse 32, actually verse 22. This part of the story is known. A lot of people have heard this story. If you've ever been in church, it's one of those stories. But if you haven't, it's a pretty incredible story. And this is the disruption moment of the rhythm. It says, one day Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. They got into a boat and they started out. Seems harmless. Let's go on a boat ride. How many of you guys are boat people? Like you love the boat thing? How many of you guys are not water people at all? That's me. Thank you. We're together. All right. One person. Our support group meets afterwards. They were fishermen. So being on a boat, that's pretty normal. There's nothing disruption about that. That wasn't the disruption. The disruption was, let's cross to the other side of the lake. You see, the way culture worked is that there was a safe side and then there was that other side. And that other side was not a side for Jewish men who are training up to be. These young men would not have had any desire to go to the other side. It was settled by one of King Herod's sons, Philip, and that side didn't exactly follow the Jewish traditions. In fact, that side was a little bit more wild. It was a little bit more cultured, and it was nothing like the left side of the lake. The side of the lake they were coming from was a safe side of the lake. That was the rhythm they were used to. But he said, go to the other side. And so they would have been like, Jesus, I'm sure there was murmurs and conversations. Maybe even one of them raised their hand and said, really? Do we want to go to the other side? Like, this side's working just fine. And sometimes in our rhythms, it can look like on the outside, everything is just fine. We're doing our work. We wake up every day, we get the kids to school, we go to our job, we come home. It looks like the rhythm is fine. But really on the inside, we know that it's not. And Jesus, looking at culture, he couldn't just look at a part of culture and say, I'm doing a great job of reaching the safe side. He needed to disrupt the rhythm. If they were going to be disciples who were leading the way for the future of the church, he needed to show them that he meant all people needed to change the rhythm of their life, not just the ones that were in the safe side. So they get in this boat and they're going to go to the other side. There's one more thing that they would have been a little bit nervous about. And the Sea of Galilee at its widest point is only 8 miles across. So it's not a really big body of water. Sometimes when you read the Bible and you hear stories, you're thinking, that's like massive. It's really small. And one of the things that tradition teaches is that they would have heard potentially the sounds at night of a man. In fact, I've had the chance to go over there, and I was there at New Year's Eve, and you can actually hear the parties of other cities across the lake. That's how much it echoes. And some of the people would believe, some of the people that were there, they would have taught that they would have heard the sounds of a man in our story. A man that was a little out of control, a man that would have made all of us in this room uncomfortable. because of his chains, because of his cuts, and because of the sound of his voice. And so when he said, let's go to the other side, let's change the rhythm up, he was disrupting the rhythm. And I believe that many of us in this room, on the outside, it looks like the rhythm is fine, but on the inside, the rhythm is not. And he's saying, I need to disrupt your rhythm so you can join my rhythm and really understand how to address loneliness and isolation, how to really see what I'm all about. So the next part of our story, they get there, and this is what happens. They arrived in the region of the Gerasenes across the lake, and that is where they were directly on the other side now from where they had been. The rhythm had been changed. The Gerasenes is an area where there are many different towns, all different cultures, all surrounded here. And this is a place that was unfamiliar territory for them. You see, sometimes when you need to disrupt your rhythm, you've got to do things you've never done before. You've got to be in places you've never done life in before. So he continues on. As Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons went out to meet him. For a long time, check out what it says. He had been homeless and naked, living in the tombs outside of the town. This is a man that no one wanted to be around. This is a man that had been living in the one place where he was accepted, the tombs. Because of his condition, he was not allowed to live among people anymore. They kicked him out of the town. They tried to put chains on him. They tried to surround him by an environment that would be suitable for him, because he then became isolated and lonely. That was the condition. So Jesus goes and meets a man who truly is the personification. His rhythm is isolation and loneliness. That is our man today in the story. And what does Jesus do when he meets isolation and loneliness? That is the rhythm today that I want to address. What do you do when you hit isolation and loneliness? In this country, it's no secret that, we've come out of a time period where being isolated and lonely was our story together for a long time, in 2020, 2021, sometimes longer for people. And what's really interesting is that there are now studies coming out, and the Surgeon General actually has come out recently with a study that's really fascinating. They have declared, based on the 50 researchers and the amount of research they've done through the Pew Research, which does research every 2 years, that being isolated and alone is at the root of most of our problems in this country. In fact, the Surgeon General just said that isolation and loneliness is more dangerous than smoking 12 cigarettes a day. It's crazy. That's how big of an issue it is. And to understand that, we've got to understand how we arrive there. And so there's this Venn diagram, this 3 parts to understanding our relationships. And so I want to show it to you. And if you have something to write with, I want you to draw one, because I'm going to ask you to do it. And if you have a phone, you can just do it on your notes app. But I want to show you the 3 vital components to social connections. And then I'm going to ask you to write in these circles so that you have something to talk about later on today at lunch, because this is going to help you understand what does Jesus do to address the rhythm that gets us in the place of isolation and loneliness. Here's the first one, all right? The first one, structure. And if you want, take a picture of these, and then that way you can kind of like look at them later. It says this: the amount of diversity of relationships as well as how often they occur. So how many relationships do you have, and how often do you interact with them? So we're talking about connections together. It begins with structure. How many do we have, and how often do we interact with them? Okay? Quality. The degree which relationships serve various needs. Okay, so you may have a lot of people in your life, but what role do they play, and how quality are they? Are they people you can count on? They take you to the doctor, or can they help you in a time when it's tough? Are they encouraging? Like, what's the quality of relationship? We have the amount and how often, and then we have the quality of those relationships. Okay? Then the third component is function. All right, so the positive and negative aspects of relationships and interactions. So based on the structure and the quality, okay, what is the function of those relationships in your life? What role do they play? And let's be real, we have some relationships in our life, some connections that are taking from us, and some that are giving life to us. And so when you combine all of these three things together, we have social connections, structure, quality, and function. And what has recently been developed through this study is just an honest look at what is happening in the culture today. 39%, okay, in the last 2 years, in 2022 when this study was completed, 39% of all adults, not some, all adults, say they feel very connected. That means that more than half feel unconnected. More than half of adults in this country feel like they don't have quality relationships or any connection in their life. And if you think about it, it just makes a lot of sense. The older we get, men, the older we get, it's said often that it's harder for us to form new relationships, new friendships, right? We get settled into our patterns and our rhythms. We get kind of in a lane where we just do the same things over and over and over again. When we're young, we're kids, like downstairs right now. Like my kids were here last year. They formed all kind of relationships they still talk about today. But the older we get, our rhythms start putting blocks in the way of those relationships. And then not only that, our own brokenness and our own issues, just like the man, starts having issues that cause divisions in a relationship. I mean, think about that demon-possessed man. He had been lost to structure, a loss of quality, and a loss of function. He was all alone. And it may seem like that is him, but that's really us. Because the minute someone blows it, they lose 2 of the 3 of those, sometimes all 3. And sometimes we lose it because of a job loss. We lose a lot of relationships when that happens. Sometimes we lose it because of an addiction problem. Sometimes we lose it because of a fight or argument, not a fart. Actually, no, that's true. Some of you lose relationships when there's a fart. I don't know. You got to call it like you see it. When you make a mistake, you just got to own it and lean into it, right? But whether it's a really drastic issue in your life or whether it's a lighthearted issue, everybody experiences a degree of loneliness and isolation in our life. That's why this series is so important. We're not asking you to join the rhythm of this church. We're asking you to join the rhythm of Jesus because it will change your life. It will change the way you live every day when you wake up. If your life is based on your rhythm, that means how your job goes, how your family works, how your marriage is going. All that stuff determines the notes of your day. But if you join the rhythm of Jesus, everything changes. Including that. I know. So what does Jesus do about this man's rhythm? I want you to look at this last verse, and I want you to see this verse is powerful because I think when we hear this story, the powerful thing is he does 2 things for the man. This verse won't say a lot to you on the front of it, but I want to show you what he did. The man who had been freed from demons. Okay, now that would be a big enough deal. If Jesus had just freed this man from demons, we'd be like, that's amazing, right? Was like no longer your problem. That would be a big enough deal. Jesus, thank you for doing that. But I don't think that's the big enough deal that he did in his life. I don't actually think the miracle ends there. It says, but Jesus sent him home, saying, now go back to your family and tell them everything God has done for you. So he went all throughout the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. You realize what he did is he gave him community back again. The killer in his life was he was separated from family. He was separated from home. He was separated from people who could love him, care for him, listen to him, help him work through those things. Jesus gave that gift back to him. And when you join the rhythm of Jesus, just like this man, there are 2 things that happen to you. Number 1, he will give you freedom. Freedom from the problem in your life of sin. Sin is anything we do that causes us to miss the mark of God, right? That's a problem we can't fix on our own. Jesus comes and rescues us through the cross and gives us freedom. Freedom to live in a rhythm that's not determined by what we do, but who we are. Because who we are is what drives our rhythm every day. It's what should drive our rhythm every day. That means when you have the freedom of Jesus and his rhythm, your rhythm is, I am a child of God, not based on the good works I do today, but by whose I am. In a world starved for identity, right now, we need to proclaim not what's wrong, but what is right with the identity of being a child of God. Because being a child of God is a higher identity than even me being a husband or a father. Being a child of God means we all have the right to sit at the table, not because of the church we belong to, the family we come from, the jobs we have, the relationships we keep, but because we know Jesus. And that serves humanity in a way that's so powerful. But the second thing that happens when you join the rhythm of Jesus is that he will give you true community. I think that's why the church was born. Because this movement has been a movement of uncommon community from the start. In the very beginning in Acts, when you see the church is born, it's not born out of like-minded, like-city people. There are people from all over the region that gathered together and heard the name of the Lord, and they repented and they were baptized, and the church was formed. The church is meant to be a place of uncommon community. But that's the exact kind of community that is the best kind of community. Because then we get to see a true picture of who God is and what he's trying to do. And we are begging for community in this society. And in the church, we cannot afford for men and women and boys and girls to attend a church service every week and then just go home in their cars and rejoin the rhythm that they had on Monday. We need a disruption to your community, your way, your rhythm, to join the rhythm of Jesus and to be part of the life of the church. That's why we've been doing this series. Adam had this vision for the series to make sure that his church, God's church, is all about getting in the rhythm of Jesus. By the way we sacrifice, by the way we connect together, by the way we serve. You see, Hope City planted right here. You can be part of an uncommon community, a movement that is helping this whole area join the rhythm of Jesus, not on the basis of what they do, but who we are. And today, I want to challenge you on a couple things you can do practically. Number one is that tonight, we're going to do something really cool. And I want to put a QR code up on the screen. And scan this QR code because when we were talking about this, one of the things that was great that came out of our time in isolation when we were there, one of the things that we learned is, man, we can hop on a Zoom call for 30 minutes, see things, know things, and then be right in our homes and connect. And what I love is they're going to take advantage of that here at Hope City. And so we're going to have this call on community, and we want you to join it. This is not just some call to say, hey, how are you? Like, we want to continue this conversation. So hop on that Zoom call, and the only way you can do it is by getting that QR code. You don't have to get in your car and go anywhere. You can do the technology. You can just be there. And so even if you're I'm not sure I want to join anything further. I'm not sure if I'm going to step further into the rhythm and the life of Hope City Church and the rhythm of Jesus. I still encourage you, be an observer. At the very least, be an observer tonight. Just come in and see. Ask questions. The chat will be open. You can do that. The second thing I want to challenge you to do is to actually engage in community at this church, whether that's joining one of the groups that we offer or on the simple end of things, the next time you walk in the door, finding one person and learning their story and allowing them to learn yours. I promise you, this is a safe place for you to be known, seen, and heard. And if you want to change your church experience, you can bounce from church to church to church and never be known. But if you walk in the door and you want to be known, you can actually join the rhythm of Jesus and change your community. Here's the last thing. Every week in service, we do this time of communion. And communion is an awesome time for you to be intimate with the Savior. And what we're talking about, Jesus was willing to go to the other side for one guy who was isolated and alone. How much more has he been willing to go for you? He's willing to cross to your other side today just to meet you so that your rhythm can change and you can move out of isolation, out of loneliness. Even though it looks like on the outside your world is all together, he's willing to cross the other side to where you're at no matter what you've done, what's been done to you today, so that he can meet you. And communion is a time where we celebrate And that's a weird word, but we celebrate because my friends have this awesome program back home called Celebrate Recovery. It's like two words that don't normally go together. But then like I realized, no, we're celebrating. We are all in recovery from something that has been hurting our lives. And we are celebrating the end of sin and the beginning of life when we join the rhythm of Jesus every time we take communion. I want to close to kind of set this up and ask you a question as you get ready for communion, is that for me personally, the last 6 months, band, you guys can come up and do your thing. The last 6 months, I've learned this lesson the hard way. Back in February, I was experiencing some health problems and some health issues, and I didn't know what was going on, and I was struggling, and I was anxious, and I already battled anxiety. You know, I carried EpiPen for crying out loud because I have a food allergy, and so I already have some past stuff with that. And to be honest with you, when I hit this moment that kind of triggered all these things, my response was just to shut down. And I cut myself off for 2 months because I was afraid to be in public, that something was going to happen to me. I was anxious. I was afraid. The only people that saw me were my wife and kids. And even then, I just kind of like, I huddled up with myself. I had a friend that came down and saw me 2 months into it because I was like, he was just like, hey, I just want to see you, and I'll do whatever it takes to see you. By the way, find a friend like that. And he saw me and he told me, I've never seen you look as bad as you did the day that we had time together. In fact, I didn't realize that I had isolated myself and that I was lonely until June, when I had to go do something, and I left home and I traveled to a place, and I was around people, and I got in the car, and I got to tell you something. I started like crying because I realized, what was I doing? That the hope and the healing, the health that I need, like, yeah, there were some physical things going on, but I needed to be around Jesus people. I needed to let people into my struggle. I was like keeping people. I am so sad right now that some of my dearest friends have just found out about some of my struggles. I had a friend named David who I've known since high school. He literally gave it to me over a Chipotle meal. Gave it to me. He looked at me and he says, I love you enough to say this. If you ever cut me out like that again, you will hear from me. Why was he mad? Because I did not take advantage of the one thing God has given me, the rhythm of Jesus all around me. I gave you 3 circles. Today, during prayer and communion, if you're a follower of Jesus and you're going to partake of communion, or if you're just thinking about him and checking him out for the first time, would you just consider those 3 circles and ask him, Jesus, where does my rhythm need to change? Is it the quality of my relationships? Do I need to lose some and add more? I don't even know where it's going to come from. Do you not have enough in your life and you need to add? Where do you need to join his rhythm? Where does he need to change and disrupt your rhythm? Today during communion, I want you to wrestle with that. And then over here, I'm going to be over here. Our staff's going to be over here. If you just want prayer, if you've never been known and opened up about a struggle in your life, this is the time. You can disrupt that rhythm before you walk out the door and actually get prayer and say, this is where I'm at. I'm 6 months into this thing and the battle's not over, but I am telling you one thing that I have radically changed in my life, and that is letting people into my rhythm who love Jesus. Don't leave here. You would be off the charts insane to leave here today without somebody in this room saying, I love you, I want to pray for you. How can I do that? Let's pray. God, I know that you disrupted rhythms so that you could change the rhythm of one. And I just thank you so much, God, that you are a personal God who loves the world enough to disrupt a rhythm, to save a life. God, loneliness and isolation is a big problem, especially for adults. And I just pray over this next worship, Lord, that whether it's in the seats, whether it's over here at prayer, whether it's in the parking lot, over at lunch, God, will you just disrupt our rhythm, Lord, so that we can join your rhythm, the rhythm of community, the rhythm of freedom, the rhythm of the kingdom, the rhythm of Jesus. In your name I pray. Amen.